Cool.
Sounds good.
And this hangout is live. We had a little technical difficulties. I'm in a new location. I rented a house for a week in the Hollywood Hills, and I have a bunch of jitter, and I'm dropping packets. Can you hear me clearly?
Dropping packet.
It's like 90% good.
90% is an A minus, but we'll go with it.
There you go.
I listened to the beginning.
Oh, so Cloud, you say, Josh?
I was going to say, I listened to the beginning of your podcast with Cody. I didn't make it all the way through it, but your conversation about the capitalization of letters was quite amusing. I had to comment on that.
Well, you didn't make it very far then. So that's all I got to.
No, I got in about 8 minutes. Yeah, I had to jump off.
What, do you have work to do?
Say it again?
I said, what, did you have some work to do?
Yeah, exactly. Tons of emails to follow up on after my travels last week across the Bay Area.
So there's this Cloud Foundry Summit thing coming up.
Nice.
Who's going to make it to that?
Be there.
Be there.
Yeah, be there as well.
We had some talks about what was on the itinerary last week, but there's a effort from the Cloud Foundry Foundation to feature some of the speakers. So I think this week we'll see some of those things come out with interviews and some videos with the speakers that'll be featured. Try to get a little excitement, a little momentum coming into the show. Just get a little bit more of the Cloud Foundry narrative out there.
Are you going to do little short interviews with speakers and stuff like that, Andrew?
Not just me, but Mike from the Cloud Foundry Foundation. There's also going to be some Cote. You mentioned Cote a moment ago. He's going to be doing a little podcasting with Sam Ramsey, so that should be fun. It seems like this Cloud Foundry thing might actually work. It's coming together. Is the audio working now? Because I was having my network doesn't seem that much better.
Yeah, audio's
if you guys
fine.
are hearing me, then.
Yeah, no, it seems good.
Fine. I am at least.
Yeah, it's good now.
All right. Well,
Yeah, I'm just about
One
to-
thing,
it's not the healthiest network I've ever been on, but we'll go with it. I think we'll get a few more. Ben Blacksay is going to jump in, but there's a little chatter today about open source on Twitter, which we can either talk about that, or you guys can. We'll wait for Ben to jump in before we get that. But if you guys have anything fun to talk about, we can bring that up. Or
yeah, I mean, if Ben's joining, it'd be cool. It'd be cool to talk about Cloud Foundry as a way to enable applications not just for the web, right? So obviously IoT that he's focused on. I'm happy to talk about mobile, what that means.
You might have missed that episode. We kind of did that once, but we could do it.
Oh, it's over. Oh, it's over. It's all figured out.
Well, yeah, IoT is a solved problem.
Yep. That's great.
I don't even think it's a defined category, but that's another.
Other fun news on Wednesday was Microsoft support for Docker. That was pretty sweet. Love to talk about that and hear what you guys think about that.
It was interesting. I wouldn't exactly say it's support for Docker, considering it's kind of a deviation from the way that normal people would think about containers. It's interesting, and certainly there's a lot of work there. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
It's still early days for that kind of project. You guys are new here too, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Why don't we spend a few minutes on that and then see when Ben gets here. So Farhan, you're one of these pivotal people, and Josh, you can tell us a little bit about yourself too.
Sure. Farhan, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm at Pivotal. I got to Pivotal through the Extreme Labs acquisition in 2013, and I focus on. I'm in the Cloud Foundry group, and I focus on actually supporting mobile for Cloud Foundry. So what that means is literally, being able to scale up, scale down, and support all the mobile use cases with Cloud Foundry. So it's pretty fun.
I'm Josh Sanderson. I'm JDS Boston on Twitter. Get together Cloud Beers events all over the place. I've been doing that for a couple of years along with Sam and Anil. HP, working in the OpenStack space. I'm primarily pretty heavy technical BD. Before HP, I was at Apsera, working with Derek Collison and his team. And prior to that, I was working at AWS, going back to around 2011 as the worldwide business development manager for messaging and platform, and got involved in a lot of our billing issues as well, which was fun, administrative nightmare stuff. So that's a little quick snippet on me.
So Ben, I have a bunch of jitter and I'm dropping packets, so I dropped everything to audio only today. But welcome to the It seems to be better with the audio.
How are people supposed to see how beautiful I am?
Well, because you don't always show your video anyway, and then you have the darkness and the red light. So
I'm
I
frowning.
don't know if it's much of a change.
I'm frowning so hard right now.
I can feel you frowning through the internet. Hey, Carlos, are you the same Carlos that was in China last time, or is this a different
Yes, I work for Pivotal from Singapore. I support Cloud Foundry here in the region. Yes.
Carlos? Very nice. So Benjamin,
Yes, sir.
what's going on? What's going on this week?
What is going on this week?
I don't know. It was I was at this lovely mall in Los Angeles today, and I opened Twitter, and then I started talking about open source with a bunch of people.
Well, that was
pretty
the first mistake.
The mall or Twitter or open source?
See? You can't even discern between all of those. You left out Los Angeles. That was also a mistake.
I don't know who just had a wrestling match with their microphone, but don't do that again.
Well, that was me opening some bourbon, so.
Yeah.
So open source. You know, I'm going to just sidestep that whole argument that you were having and just go straight to. I think everyone is starting to recognize that a PAS of some sort and some description, and probably several different descriptions, is how people are understanding that they need to build applications, because there's no real differentiator in that layer, and this allows them to focus on stuff that matters for their business. And to quote Amazon folk, it's still day one for PAS. So I think it's a little early for folks to be freaking out about who is more open than thou and who's closing more deals. It's just either this is a gigantic space and there's a reason for us to exist, or it's not, in which case we should all just shut it down.
Well, let me ask the obvious, or maybe non-obvious question. Does Apple Watch apps, do Apple Watch apps require a PAS?
It's not that anything requires a PAS. I think that nothing requires a PAS. With enough talent and time, you can construct an awesome infrastructure for your applications.
Agree.
The issue is, why would you want to when you could just put all of that talent and time into the things that actually provide you with differentiated business value?
I've been developing this line of thought, and I will one day publish it, but I'm arguing that your choice is not between platform or no platform. Your choice is really between having some kind of structured, standardized platform or having an ad hoc, do-it-yourself, build-it-yourself.
The question is who builds the
platform.
platform, not whether or not you need one.
Yeah, right.
If you've been places that have gotten to any sort of scale and managed somehow to have no platform, it's horrendous.
They didn't get there really, or they're constantly on fire.
It turns out that if you have billions of dollars to throw away, you can do that. But that's about the only way, and it's not sustainable.
And then you have to maintain it, right?
No, that's still a platform. That's just a platform that requires constant sacrifice of human blood. That's it.
Yeah.
Right, it's 10 different platforms. It's like saying you have 10 different strategies.
All the demands sacrifice.
Yeah, the 11th strategy is human sacrifice. So that's my perspective, is that
there are many gods in this pantheon, Ben.
There are many gods in this pantheon. It's a big, big temple.
They must all be appeased.
Yeah. So did that?
So that doesn't necessarily change, because I do think there is this narrative around open source that definitely impacts the story of all these projects, the story of many things that were used to build the big web. You don't have cloud computing without open source.
Yeah, I feel like the just like it's. I know it seems weird to say this that we're so far into it, and yet it seems pretty early days for figuring out business models around open source. And I think people still struggle with exactly how to structure things in different markets and how to sell, and it's not easy, and we're still feeling our way. And in talking to customers, the big value for open source in particular is just avoiding lock-in. And in fact, PaaS helps them do that, which is one of the other attractive features of it, right? If your PaaS can run on any major cloud or on-prem, then you have successfully avoided lock-in, you get an A+.
Well, Ben, that's an interesting point to bring up. There's an interesting debate by another person you might be familiar with, who made the argument that the utility was the most important, and that lock-in didn't actually matter until you solved a bunch of other problems.
That's right. So I would come at it from two ways to support that wisdom. The first is, I didn't say that I think that lock-in is the actual big concern. Customers do. And to the extent that PaaS and open source helps them feel like they are avoiding lock-in, that's a good thing. Because the important part is that they're getting onto an actual platform, that they're adopting these public infrastructure components. But the other thing is exactly that until you have solved a bunch of other problems, and that's exactly what infrastructure does. That's what PaaS does. That's what these public cloud infrastructure systems do. They solve a bunch of problems for you. You're still left with really hard business problems, and as of today, you still need to know what you're doing, but you get a big head start today versus what you would have.
Is there really technology that's going to emerge that makes people don't have to know? They don't have to know what they're doing. Is that possible? Or is it that what you told?
We're losing you. You can't take much more of this.
I was trying to say that.
Please submit your question.
It's not a matter.
Window.
All right, I will type this.
No, say it. Say it. What is it that you're trying to say? Use your words.
I'm trying. I have typed.
It's like having a conference call with Max Headroom. It's awesome.
Man, all right, shout out to people who grew up in the 80s. What you need to know moves up the stack. Yeah, good. So you've answered your own question. Moving on. Yeah, there's no point here, I think, where you get to sort of it's as easy to use as WordPress for doing basic stuff, and somehow miraculously is as easy to use as WordPress for basic stuff, but when you're doing gigantic stuff. Because at gigantic stuff, even idea is not easy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Let's dissect this idea about.
Wait, I have another quote to go with your utility trumps everything quote, which is that scale breaks everything.
Indeed.
So the bar for what is large scale keeps moving up as well, but the upper bound is moving at the same time.
And it's the bar of the average, or the experience of the average, that's really where these platforms are emerging, I think.
Yeah.
Let's dissect this idea of lock-in and what that means. Because some of what you said about PaaS, we adopt a public platform that is run by one entity, then I'm not sure the argument applies at all. Like there's a particular of solution which is not actually a PaaS per se. It's the ability to deploy a PaaS that gives you that freedom.
Um, sure, and that's where I was saying that the PaaS sort of decouples you from that underlying stuff. But going straight at the lock-in question, I've talked to some customers who were concerned even about, they were more concerned about the APIs, and to me, there are so many ways that you can abstract those APIs that APIs are not the lock-in. The things that are actually lock-in are the data that you've got stored there, right? If you have a petabyte of data stored in S3, moving somewhere else, that's going to take a while. If there are services on which you depend on a given platform that do not exist anywhere else, that's lock-in. But then the question becomes, what else would you possibly do? Right? If this service is critical to what you're trying to build, you can either build it yourself or use the one provided, at which point you're locked in. And so that's a business decision. It's a trade-off. It's not enough to just say, I refuse to be locked in, because the alternative may be you ship a year later and you're dead.
Back to utility.
It is back to utility.
And arguably, data gravity goes away eventually.
Please never say that again.
Seriously, at what point?
I mean,
It never goes away.
data gravity is the dumbest thing in cloud. You heard it here, folks.
Let the trolling begin.
Yeah, it's called Metcalfe's Law. It's been around a while.
I think in reality you just end up getting more and more data. You never outrun the speed of the network or the slowness of the network.
Well, the way to address the concern about lock-in by putting all your data in one place is the same way that you deal with availability, and that's you put it more than one place. So if you're doing real-time replication of your data to multiple clouds to avoid lock-in, then you never get into the situation where everything is blown up and suddenly you have to move all
So
of
the
it.
speed of real-time replication offsets the pain of having to somewhere quote-unquote move.
Right, you've amortized the cost.
Little bite-sized simplified replication.
There is no disaster recovery in the cloud.
Beautiful.
Well, we know that quote too. There's no such thing as standby infrastructure.
It's the Ben Black show, starring Ben Black as Ben Black.
Everyone just quote me for the rest of the night. Just keep the quotes coming.
So what's the interesting stuff we're working on right now that relates to this? If we're going to avoid the open source topic, which
I don't think there's a need to avoid it. I just think that the parts of it where there are conflict are not even worth touching. There are a lot of interesting aspects to it, but none of them, I think, go to conflict, right? Either this is a gargantuan, hugely multi-billion-dollar market, in which case there's plenty of room for all of us, or it's not.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting and in some sense amusing is I wasn't actually talking at all about platforms in the middle of that conversation. And
I know.
Other people are the ones that made it go in that direction.
Yeah, I know.
And I still didn't.
I know. Billy hit you first.
No. Come on, Ben.
It's just not worth it. I mean,
I want to have a philosophical discussion.
Okay, well, outside of lock-in,
Yeah.
are you seeing customers looking at open source as one of two other things? One, thinking that the platform can move much, much faster because of the open source community contributing. And then two, customers who say, you know what, it's open source. If we want to actually add some functionality that we think will take a long time for a particular, one vendor to add to the platform, we can do it ourselves.
I think in the abstract, those are sort of give customers the warm and fuzzies. I think in practice, they never actually happen.
Not on any project ever.
I think on some open source projects, you get some of that velocity from the community, but I think if you dig in, like on a lot of Apache projects, the core committers are all paid to commit, right? That's their job.
It's quite a privilege to be able to sit around and work on free code all the time.
But I mean, it's the same as sitting around and working on proprietary code all the time, right? That's just their job, right?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that there's no. I would love to be contradicted on this, but I haven't seen a lot of projects where it's a monstrous project and yet there somehow isn't a core set of paid committers that are actually doing most of the lifting.
Okay, if this is the case, so this idea of lock-in, open source and so lock-ins is a fallacy, because if the companies don't want to do this, so they have core developers that work for someone else, so you always are locking for those developers because they are doing their work, you are just consuming that. So you cannot get yourself because you are not investing money in effort in that particular project. So you are always dependent from someone else.
Yeah, so this comes back to the utility question, right? If the PaaS is useful enough to you to overcome concerns about not developing that talent, that experience.
Let's not talk about PaaS. Let's talk about in general. This is true.
You're right. It applies in general, right? Which is at any point you're making a decision, and it's really a sort of threefold decision. Do I buy a commercial proprietary product? Do I buy a commercial open source product? Or do I develop the talent to build this stuff in-house? And the right answer today could very easily be the wrong answer tomorrow, right? It might be that you need to ship, so you go with one of those first two, but later scale has broken everything and you discover that you need to build something new, at which point you need to shift to number 3.
Well, there's a distinct difference between something primitive and something far more sophisticated, and consuming each in your application and pretending like you're not locking into something like simple workflow, for example.
Oh, look at this. We got Chip. Chip Childers. Introduce yourself.
What is going on, people?
We're just sitting around on audio only because Andrew can't actually pass the network from Los Angeles to wherever it needs to go.
That's cool. I'm in a hotel myself, so I'm sure the Wi-Fi wouldn't appreciate video.
So introduce yourself for people out there that don't know who you are.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, I'm Chip. I work for the Cloud Foundry Foundation, work for Sam, and I do a variety of things. Some of them community related, some of them technical related, and some of them just, I don't know, involving email.
Sounds like my job.
Yeah, man. Sounds like most of our jobs.
What's the T-shirt you're wearing in that picture that keeps coming up on the screen?
I don't know. That's an old one. Couldn't tell you.
Looks like Citrix to me.
Yeah, probably.
Citrix with the
Those
monkey.
of you that don't know me, I've got a yeah. So I've got a history with Apache Cloud Stack, and I'm still involved in that community. Love the people in it. But that's probably one of the T-shirts from that conference a few years ago.
I was gonna say it looks like a Cloud Stack. There's some Cloud Stack CPIs floating around, especially in the Asian side of this equation.
Yeah, NTT. Although I think they might have moved off of it, and I think they're deploying via something else now.
The best one I saw
in a while.
was from a university.
Oh yeah. Do you happen to remember which one?
I can never pronounce those. Chinese
Hokkaido?
universities. No, it's Chinese.
Oh, Chinese. Yeah. Chinese. Hmm.
I can dig it up.
We have to hunt it down. Have to hunt it down. You never know what's going on over in that part of the world. There's all kinds of activity.
We were having a riveting discussion about the dynamics of open source and the decisions and how they are impacting or impacted by a bunch of factors in and around how we create code and consume it. So you seems like something to be up your alley with your background.
Yeah.
And we've only landed on lock-in as a real factor so far.
But even that is not a real factor.
Correct.
Well, I mean, lock-in's a thing that exists when you use their technology, right? I don't care how you produce it. It's a reality, right?
Correct.
Well, yeah.
The worst lock-in you can ever have is to your own technical debt and bad decisions.
Yeah, we're something. I would say the second worst is when that's stuff that you've built yourself and you've no ability to work with others, whether you're buying from somebody or whether you're collaborating with somebody.
No alternative as well.
Yeah.
I think you just repeated me.
That's sure.
You had me at hello. Yeah.
So clearly this is riveting. That if you're all just massively agreeing with yourselves.
Well, I was trying to get some controversial stuff started, and Ben said
Would someone whose paycheck does not rely on Cloud Foundry like to chime in? Not that that's why we're saying these things. It works the other way around, but that might provide some variety.
Anyone out there who wants to jump in, we have 10 viewers or listeners, as you will.
Yeah, tonight's a special radio edition.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody has their AM voice on.
I think so. I just threw something out there right when Chip jumped in that was using the AWS lingo. So you got a big difference between EC2, which is what you could call primitive compute, and simple workflow, which is stacked on top of 2 or 3 layers of different services to create an outcome-oriented service. And when there's something there, the more you are relying on something that's abstracting you away from the actual complexity, as I think Carlos was saying about you don't have the developers, the more you're exposing yourself to lock-in, you don't realize how complex the lock-in really is. So I don't know.
How about we'll drop open source for a minute, and then maybe we'll come back to it. But who has read the Steve Yege rant about Google's working together, their internal processes, their internal quote-unquote platforms versus what he'd experienced at Amazon? Who's familiar with that?
Yeah, I read
Anyone?
that.
Yep, read it.
I know Ben's
Do
read it.
educate for those of us that have not read it.
I haven't read it actually. And how does Yeye pronounce his last name or spell it?
Yegi.
It's Yegi. It's Y-E-G-G.
Oh, I did read that. Yeah, I read that. That was like 3-4 years ago. Yeah.
It's been quite a few years now. He had been at Amazon for some time, did a bunch of work there, came over to Google, and posted a thing on G+, that wasn't actually supposed to be public, but then it was left as a public thing, and there's probably dozens of copies of it floating around. It's definitely worth reading if you're thinking about any of this stuff, in my opinion, because it really outlines some of this.
How about you summarize it for the class?
Say again?
Summarize it for the class.
Well, he's comparing and contrasting his perspective, and the thing that he says is Amazon's advantage is that Bezos mandated that everyone would interact through APIs, and that had this profound effect across the company with regards to their ability to execute and the way that they are able to integrate with each other's systems.
Yeah, that was part of the move to SOA that happened, man.
Rip Rowan.
13
So is that,
years ago.
do you think that's a fair summary, Ben, or would you add anything else to that?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? The philosophy of saying everything through hardened APIs is really where everything comes from, right? That ability to interact efficiently and move quickly, that's in part where AWS itself comes from, is from practicing that in various ways internally. So, yeah, everything's like that.
And then in contrast, he was arguing that one of the things that was holding some of Google's efforts back is the fact that everyone was allowed to do, kind of from first principles, whatever they wanted with a bunch of different things, and that led to, I think, in part, some frustration from him that led to the writing of this essay, which, as I said, everyone should read.
Yeah, and I think that that's actually something that everyone can relate to, in exactly the same way that, over the life of a given application, you'll often end up with multiple versions of things deployed simultaneously. Um, when an org gets to a sufficient size, and that size is far smaller than people would like to admit, for whatever reason, you'll start to see the emergence of those sorts of parallel projects. And, it's good and bad, but I mostly share Steve's frustration on that one.
All I know is right now, if I could get Google Analytics on Google Sites, I would pay Google money for that.
You're asking too much there.
I thought you could do Google Analytics on Google Sites.
Good luck. Have fun.
Hey, if you know how to do it, it's time to turn on the screen sharing and walk Andrew through it. I think this is valuable enough to spend the rest of the night.
Let's skip to the tutorial section.
Yeah, absolutely. Change of format.
I will bet you the best omakase that my salary could buy.
Like literally just follow these instructions. I thought I did it on my own Google site.
Yeah, we'll revisit this next week.
Hey, why don't you guys take that offline? We'll follow it up at the next meeting.
So we expect to be posted.
I will make a video of the meal. So Ben, you were kind of involved at the point where some of that transition took place. So watching the adoption of these different platforms and specifically Cloud Foundry have found impact on the workflow and the way that organizations are basically asked to reframe how they think about the world when they move to this standardized platform. And maybe you could make some comments how that impact for people that you watched as they went through it.
Yeah, I mean, the number one challenge is the change in mindset by far. And even when you have a bunch of really, really talented technical folks, a change in mindset that further implies a massive amount of work because you have to rewrite everything. It's difficult. The thing that I also found is that there's a lot of education that has to go on because when you're dealing with developers who are used to sort of trying to know as little as possible about the infrastructure underneath them as they can manage, it's difficult to transition to a situation where they have an explicit contract with the infrastructure, which may be different from whatever more simplistic notions they had previously. So in a sense, a PaaS is that. It's an explicit contract with the infrastructure. And I think for the most part, companies don't have anything like that. So it's doubly or triply challenging depending on which pieces of that you hit. And that's before you even get to the part where you have to write code.
But I want to take advantage of this weird thing to do with how we set up this app server and this networking gear.
Well, I think there's no, in a sense, when you talk about having a contract with the stuff underneath you that's explicit like this, it gets to that, a statement like, we're all full stack developers now. I just think that there's no way to be effective as an engineer of any description with useful, scalable, available services if you don't understand how the stuff works. Really understand how it works.
You can't say full stack without a trigger warning.
Ben, what you're saying is dead on, but the reality in a lot of the companies that are trying to hire developers is that the overwhelming majority of folks that call themselves developers really don't understand much below their current level of abstraction, right? That's actually a huge problem in our industry right now, is that as we kind of bring people higher and higher and higher, the new developers entering the teams, entering the workforce, just don't actually understand what's going on underneath.
So it's full.
Yeah, we lost you, Andrew. I'm sure it's awesome, whatever you're saying, though.
Yeah, I mean, that was like the best point ever.
You put it really succinctly.
So, one question on this. So, I thought the platforms, all those things, all of those stacks that you put on top of laying things up, is to make the life of developers and bring developers or more people to develop code and to be able to deploy code and have the same experience, and your code run in a way that you be seamless integrated with the platform and so and on and on.
Yeah,
if you still need people to.
I think you're already going sideways here. That part where it's to allow more people to write code, that's absolutely not true.
Well,
a PaaS is a weapon that can be wielded by people who know what they're doing. It is not the case that you can show up not knowing what you're doing and write good, scalable applications regardless of the infrastructure. The only question is, did you have to write the infrastructure?
So there are a number of companies coming out that are packaging up higher on the stack than ever before, right? And making it possible and claiming that business analysts can now write code. So I see where you're coming from there.
That happens about once every generation.
Yeah.
Right. I'm saying that's where a lot of this is coming from, though.
Well, you know what? COBOL was like that too, and that's why everyone uses COBOL today.
Exactly.
So, but people still use assembly today as well, but doesn't mean that assembly is a spread and is the best language that you should use to develop code today, right?
Sure.
So that's why we have very high-level languages.
They use what language?
Assembly.
Oh, assembly.
Assembly.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, but the point I'm making is that COBOL was explicitly so that business people could write code, right? That's why it's intentionally.
Yeah, but those business people in the 70s has different mindset and different skills that this business people for today.
You think?
Yeah. So the company
yes.
That's not my experience at all. Like huge amounts of Wall Street run on traders looking at spreadsheets.
Yep.
Well,
I actually want to make a comment that the platform's benefit has often been advertised for the developers, but it's largely an operational advantage that you're getting from that.
I think it's multifold. So on the developer side, I really don't, to the point that you raised initially, which is, how important is that hardened API? That API is critical exactly because it represents an explicit contract. This is what the infrastructure does, and this is how you're supposed to use it. And if you don't have that, then you're kind of lost, right? Everyone's off.
Let's get back to Wall Street here. So Excel spreadsheets. So why a financial guy has to understand the infrastructure if they want to run his model in a distributed and parallel platform?
I just want to do a hedge fund trade. I just want to trade faster. I don't give a shit about the infrastructure.
That's my point. So that's my point. The platform should give that.
You're missing something entirely here. I said already, it's not for them, right? It's not that it should be easier for them to write code. It's that they shouldn't be writing code at all.
Oh no, that's the intention of somebody who's abstracting up higher, is to attract more people to the realm of being able to actually interact.
But that's higher than this platform we're talking about. That's basically
like MapR, who are, I think it's MapR, right? Who essentially say, yeah, you keep using your Excel spreadsheet, but on the back end it's Hadoop.
But that's scary.
Right? Well, it's scary regardless. It doesn't matter if it's in Excel or if it's talking to Hadoop. Like, how do you know? How can you assert anything about the safety, correctness, availability, any part of that spreadsheet? You can't.
Well, the
I would
platform.
argue that it's not about letting those personas write code. It's about getting to the point where they have a domain-specific language, they have an application, there's a platform under that, there's infrastructure under that, and you're trying to enable people up those stacks.
I
It's just
don't
not
actually
the layer we're talking about.
So I'm going to tell you, they have a domain-specific language. It's Excel.
Yep.
Ah, well, go look at the guys that are making this pitch about making rapid deployment possible when you're not a developer. Like that's a pretty interesting set of pitches they're coming out with now. They're trying to abstract away from that series of artisanal trades of being a developer, dependent on a developer, just like we were talking about DevOps for last week.
I understand. And like if you look at what people can do with WordPress, 15 years ago they would have had to know how to write Perl, right? But now they can just click some buttons and then they have a website. But nobody mistakes that for a high performance, high availability, rich customer experience, right?
Right on. Yeah. That's not
I wasn't
Really, we're
I
talking
wasn't
about two different
Yeah, I wasn't
problems.
mistaking that at all. I think the fact that I can do that, or anyone could do that with WordPress, that's a huge win.
It is a huge win. What
And
I'm
I think-
saying is that we should not mistake that for people writing code. What we've done is we've made that functionality accessible to them without writing code, which was my point.
No, it's a higher functioning service catalog. It's a much higher functioning.
I think that's exactly the point I was trying to make, is that you're getting to the point where their domain-specific language is able to take advantage of these underlying applications that someone else provided for them.
Yeah,
But
and what I'm
this
saying is that there is no
is my original point, that if you have an Excel spreadsheet that gives you a way of you deploy your model there, and they don't have to care about the infrastructure, but the platform takes care of get the high-level language, that's the Excel VBA language, and translate that to a MPI code, something else that you're going to run in the platform. In the platform, you guarantee that you're going to run the mods and give the response back. So that's my point.
The guarantee is that you're going to do the wrong thing as fast as possible. This is what I was saying. Like, having massive billion-dollar trades dependent on someone's spreadsheet about which you can assert no formal guarantees, that's awful. I don't want
Well, you have now billions of dollars being traded in high-frequency trading. That's people. There are some people who make a lot of money now. And
that's not a spreadsheet, and those people have keys.
It's not, but there's a lot of mistakes happen there. You'll see those happen. So just because those guys that they are specialized in writing that particular code, they make mistakes as well. The mistakes are there.
Those are PhDs.
But they are making mistake. And
they are making.
That's why you see.
So imagine what someone who has no idea what they're doing can achieve.
That's why my point, that you should provide a platform that can abstract that. And you are not there yet. I agree with you.
But
that you are not there yet. But you should aim for that.
Abstraction is not one that allows them to write code, right? The problem is not that they can't.
They don't even make that claim, though. They claim you can handle the complexity, design multi-device, multi-channel enterprise apps with your own data model, complex business logic, and process flows and integrations, and directly deploy to your users with a single click. I just read that off the Mendix website.
Man, awesome.
That's it. That's all they claim. They don't say you can now code. They just talk about outcomes.
Yeah, and that's a great way to pitch it. But I again want to say, dig under the surface. What's actually there, right? Is this if this then that for your enterprise? In which case, there's not a whole lot you can do. But it turns out that enterprise integration, it's huge amounts of tiny things, and if you can make those tiny things go really easily, that's actually awesome. Like the Spring XD story is the same thing. Like this enterprise integration is all about how many integrations you have and how easy you make it to do those simple things. It's like the story around how do I build a massive real-time streaming app is very different. There isn't a part in there where you have a massive 10,000 line script.
I'm gonna quote William Sherman here. Every attempt to make code easy and safe will result in humiliation and disaster.
I heard he was into Python. That guy.
I heard he was into burning cities.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Only southern cities. So, yes, couldn't have said it better. Use less words, so he wins.
He had a lot of nice things to say about journalists too.
Smart man.
So what's the next step then? I mean, what if you have a platform? Then don't you see these? I guess I'm kind of wondering. The applications that get built on top of the platform start to look suspiciously like the domain-specific language that allows those people that have their domain expertise to take advantage of those domain-specific applications.
But aren't we talking about something like a concept around like an honest API that allows you to at least have some semblance of control over the back end of your web service that you're consuming, so you can configure it to your heart's desire? I don't know how to put it.
I think that's the path to disaster.
I know, that's what I'm testing.
It's that the interface is explicit. The contract is explicit. This is what the infrastructure does.
Yes.
Right.
I think that the path of configuration and configuring everything to your heart's desire just leads to a lot of sorrow.
Right. That's a test. It was a test case. It was intentionally stated in a frivolous way. But the idea that honest API is really the heart of it, because you have, as Ben said, a contract that's established that's not negated under any circumstances.
But then the hard work is figuring out what that contract should be.
I agree. And I think we're still figuring it out.
Every day.
Every day. Still day one.
That's a break-fix type contract.
It's not a break-fix type contract, I think it's an evolutionary thing.
Yes.
The Cloud Foundry API is wildly different from the AWS API. They do different things, right? So it's not that
yes.
It's changing all the time, and so you're trying to solve different problems. So it's hard. I think I've said it before. API design is really hard. Even when you know what you're doing, and we're all still trying to figure out what we're doing here.
I think that's the thing is you got to be honest with where we're at in the evolution. And it's one thing to know what you're doing, but it's hard to accommodate for all possible use cases and workloads that you want to be able to give the advantages to.
Yeah, and you know what? I want to tie that back to the question of sort of making it possible for people to draw lines and create their apps. What that's doing is driving everything up the stack, but you got to realize what that's doing is commoditizing a space. An app that you can build by drawing lines in Visio and poof it exports code or whatever, that is not an app. That's not the killer app that's going to drive billions in revenue for your company.
Yep.
So they're automating the stuff that doesn't make you any money, right?
Well, I think just about to flip it over, Ben, they're trying to say that why make a developer do that and lose their mind? Why hire a world-class developer to do that when you can have a business analyst get that off that developer's plate and let the developer focus on the high-end artisanal work?
Right. Well, essentially what they're saying is this isn't even a programming task.
Bingo. This is a process program. What else? Not programming even. It's process design.
This is like a process definition.
Yep.
And in a sense, what they're saying is here's the API for expressing processes.
Tell us your business rules.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
So, I think that the value is always going to be people who are strong in technology and they're able to use these ever more sophisticated tools to solve these ever more sophisticated problems. But there's no point at which somebody who isn't very technical is going to take a tool that is really sophisticated and apply it in that way. That's just not how it works.
So I'm gonna switch gears here. So just see your thoughts on data services, data applications, applications that's generate and use a lot of data, and how you see containers helping this, or they don't help now, or so how you see the trend coming if you have, for example, Spark-based applications, an application that needs to process a lot of data. So how you see containers helping those applications or not helping at all?
I don't think containers are just a tool. You know,
They're
Yeah.
totally containers are totally orthogonal to that
I
problem.
understand that, but I'm just asking if they're gonna help, they are helping, or they don't help. That's
it's
my question.
no difference. It makes
It's
no difference.
orthogonal. Orthogonal means it doesn't have an impact.
Like the question here is, what is my deployment artifact, right? And if it's a VM, it's an AMI, it's a container image, it's a tarball, right? It doesn't matter. The point is, I produced a deployment artifact and I'm running it. So
Yes, but when you want to restate that, you want to restart, when you want to, something crashes, you want to go back, there's no difference between using a container and have to instantiate a new VM back, or you just instantiate a new container back. So speed in terms of be back in business.
Well,
now,
you said that you're talking
Operational.
about ingesting a lot of data.
No,
you-
processing data, and sometimes you are processing data that in your VM crashes or your container crashes, and you want to recover from that state. And you might be a VM that you are processing the VM, you have to recover from the VM
so the
itself that was
Right,
in.
but the hard part of managing state was not how long it takes to restart a process.
well, hold on. Something else to consider. And this goes back to a discussion that was totally unproductive on Twitter because for some reason people didn't understand what I was saying, which is, do you have a fully automatic deployment pipeline into which you push changes and out the other end come your deployment artifacts which then get deployed, or are you treating your deployments like pets? Because what you're talking about is a deployment pet where I care that this special and unique container crashed. And the answer is no, I don't care at all. And if I need to deploy new code, then that better go through the same deployment pipeline as everything else that's out there. And if I can make a container image, I can make a VM image, is it overlays? It doesn't matter. I can do overlays for full VMs, right? And just deploy diffs. You can do that with VMs. So there's honestly no difference whatsoever in that aspect of it. Containers happen to be a little lighter weight. That's nice, but you also give up some of the stronger security guarantees, which may not be necessary in a lot of environments, that actual VMs provide you. So again, operationally, shouldn't make a bit of difference. And that's actually something that I think developers should not care that much about.
Okay.
Well, operationally, it does make a difference, right? I mean, there are attributes to the different deployment artifacts that you're describing, right? And you describe some of those attributes.
But you also give up some of the stronger security guarantees, which may not be necessary in a lot of environments.
What just happened?
That was Paul catching up on what I just said. Hi, Paul.
Anyway, where were we? I think what you just said about the containers. Why don't you go into what you're trying to? I didn't quite understand the point you're making, Chip. So maybe.
What I was saying was that Ben, you were saying that it doesn't matter to operations, what the deployment artifact is, and I would say I think it does. You should have similar processes regardless of what that artifact is, but you need to design a platform that's appropriate for the way that you want to operate, right? And if you want to do density, containers are a little bit better at that, right? And it's the tool chains apply to operations just like they do development. However, Containers really don't relate to the development process.
So I would actually say that the way that things have been implemented today, containers are a little lighter weight. That is not inherent in this remotely. And if you look at the various projects that boot language VMs directly, that is even lighter weight. And I've seen some stuff coming that also does what amount to real VMs, but as lightweight as containers. So I don't think it makes a bit of difference on that front. And I also think that those sorts of decisions, you're right, you do have to architect with some assumptions around that, but those things should be just encoded in the platform such that developers don't care.
Absolutely agreeing about that. Absolutely agreeing about that.
So you're right that it can make a difference in terms of maybe how efficiently you can operate your infrastructure, what security guarantees you can provide, what resource consumption guarantees you can provide. But I think over time a lot of those things will fade away and there'll be less and less difference, which won't mean that it won't matter, but I think it will be less prominent in people's minds. Right? This is another artifact of it being so early in this process.
And that's the state we all need to be in, where
We're just barely crawling. We're just coming out of the water. We're the fish with the lungs.
That's right. This is lungfish paths.
Because the question was also started with this focus on data, and I kind of feel like right now anything that's interesting on data, when you're talking about density, it's going to consume a whole machine anyway.
Yeah. If it's interesting data.
Well, if there's a lot of work to do processing, I'm pretty sure you could use all the CPU you can give it, and probably a lot of I/O on the disk and the networks as well. What else you got, Carlos?
Just thinking about containers yet. So with this move from Microsoft in going to containers as well, nano servers, blah 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 blah. Do you think at some point VMs people will not talk about VMs anymore? They just talk about containers, and everything that you're going to deploy things will be on top of containers, or doesn't matter, as you said. But there's a lot of hype now about containers, right?
The hilarious part of what you just said is what Microsoft actually announced are not really containers, they're VMs. Go back and read that press release.
Containers on top of VMs, Andrew?
No, it's a hypervisor, a Type 1 hypervisor running what's essentially root file systems. So it's packaged like what we're doing with the containers in the Linux side, but it's not kernel level. It's actually more like a hypervisor starting a machine than it is the process isolation you're seeing on Linux.
Yeah, and I would actually argue that is how things will work in the future. Not necessarily exactly what they're doing, but that model where it's as lightweight as a container, but it looks an awful lot like a VM, and uses the hardware support for isolating VMs. I think that's where.
I guess the question becomes then: is the resulting hypervisor layer that's required for each container much less than would be normally required under normal VM circumstances? And if yes, then isn't that a great advantage or improvement?
I think. Go ahead.
I feel like a lot of hypervisors are as big as they are because they're actually just operating systems with hypervisors in them.
Right.
And
I haven't looked closely at this yet, so I'm interested.
Yeah, I would say that the hypervisors are kind of the same in terms of footprint. Whether or not the whole OS is there, I think makes very little difference for this question. There are other reasons why you might want to get rid of most of it, but I don't think it matters for this question. But I think this does highlight that there's such a dramatic difference in the functionality across different hypervisors and across different, I'll say, isolation technologies, whether it's containers or VMs that are paraverts versus hardware VMs, like so much variation. And that's a good indicator that we're still figuring it out. until things start converging, and despite all the hype, we're not converging on C groups.
So it's interesting because Microsoft announced this as a new container technology, right? So they are saying this in the press release as a new container technology, and as you said, it's not actually a container. So it seems to me they want to get in the hype just to use the hype that everyone talk about container to see.
Doesn't every press release have the word container in it?
I don't think that's fair.
Well, I think it's much more than that, guys. I don't think it's just hype and a PR.
Again, that's what I'm saying. That there are real ways to deliver things that are a lot like containers, but using the technology that's been developed for VMs, so that you get the low overhead. Because that's really why people want containers.
Totally.
Not because they want containers, right? They don't want process isolation. They want something lightweight.
Yep.
So if you can deliver lightweight with the VM isolation guarantees, that's what you want.
Even better, deliver them a platform that makes that an implementation detail, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather have a developer talk about their code, how they want it packaged, how they want it run, and let the features of isolation and density, that's a platform concern.
You know, that's a really interesting comment, and I totally agree. But it does speak to the fact that if the underlying infrastructure does not have the capabilities that you as a developer expect in order to be able to deploy your app such that it functions the way that you want, that's a problem, right? And this is actually a conversation I had with the folks doing the app container spec, that you need to have this ability to say, if all of my capabilities are not met, don't launch, right? And
I think there's
that makes perfect sense.
Here's the thing. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just talking over you. There's this huge variation in the capabilities of the hypervisors, and over time that'll narrow. But as of right now, part of what's holding up the convergence of container technology is the lack of convergence of capabilities for the hypervisors.
Here's a point I want to make very strongly, and that is we're all conflating, and it's not just us, but this whole industry is conflating what containers actually represent and what they mean. And on one hand, you have this notion of process isolation and the things that the Linux kernel can do, and certainly Solaris and BSD and a bunch of other stuff before that. And on the other hand, you have what in some sense I think is the more interesting thing, which is the packaging of these root file systems in a way that we get away from all the shared library problems that we had, the dependency problems that we had, trying to manage these things other ways. And that as a unit of deployment, with the implications of what other people call immutable infrastructure and the rest of it, I think that's actually a more interesting movement than these implementation details at the bottom, whether it's a hypervisor or a kernel isolating the processes.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's really exciting.
And that's why people can say container in the press release from Microsoft when it's actually quite different technology than what people are calling containers on Linux.
Yeah, and you know that I've long had a vigorous hatred of OS package management as a way to manage systems.
You're a man of many vigorous hatreds.
Well, that one has been more vigorous than most. You know, hate strongly or not at all. And the reason is exactly that you have no idea what the heck the state of the system is, right? It's why I don't like this whole convergent model of infrastructure.
Huh.
You know, you don't know what you get.
Or where it is, right.
You know that the points that you anticipated being important match, but you don't actually know the rest of the state of the system and whether that influences the outcome. That's why it's so important to deploy complete artifacts, right? The exact thing that went through CI is what gets deployed.
See you guys, I'm dropping off.
All right, cheers.
Good to hear from you.
You too.
Yeah.
But I think that condensing or collapsing onto an agreed kind of tool chain, that will help us move forward.
Well, at least converging
I really
that says that you got to deploy the whole thing is a win.
Absolutely. So Carlos,
Yes.
thanks for joining us from China. Did what we said make sense to you, or how are you thinking? Because you asked
No, I think
some
yes.
questions. It sounds like you've been thinking a lot about.
I think it's pretty much the point of what's the container. So I think you narrow down you nail and you said that. So your point so because there are so many people talking about containers, but from different point of views, and so then I think it makes sense. Yes.
We've gone a good 62 minutes. We started a tiny bit late actually, so maybe not quite that. But do we have any other points we want to get out there before we shut it down for Monday Eve? It is Monday Eve after all, the night before Monday.
Andrew, you lead off with Summit because you can't have a After Dark without talking about Summit briefly.
I did talk about the Summit, but you can go ahead and
well, let's
talk about
close
Summit.
on it. Don't forget Summit's coming up. It's going to be crazy.
We'll bookend with the Summit. Well, there's some other. We didn't give any good secrets this week either. Water's usually the one with the secrets. Are you at Apache this week?
Yeah, I am.
So there's a bunch of Cloud Foundry stuff going on at ApacheCon this week too.
Yeah, we're sponsoring. A lot of those projects are quite related to what we're doing, so it's good to get out in front of this audience. So we'll share a little bit of the Cloud Foundry story with them tomorrow morning, and have a booth, all that good stuff. And then my friends at Pivotal are doing some great things on the data services side here as well. So.
Well, you also you can go hang out with our friend Koto.
Yep. He's going to be booth duty for the Cloud Foundry booth for a good chunk of time. So if anybody wants to meet him, maybe just get some free analyst advice. Swing by the Cloud Foundry booth.
He can tell you how to think about your
industry. There you go.
But are you doing the talk? And then Matt Stein has a talk.
Yeah, I'm doing a talk.
We're gonna do
yeah, I think we just have those two.
I'm really looking forward to what Matt produces because he just did a mind meld with Onsi on Diego and Lattice and the rest of the stuff we're working on. So he's going to try to mix that all together and put it out there. But I haven't seen his slides, so I'm looking forward to what he comes up with.
Yeah, it should be a great talk.
Anything else you want to point out about Summit? I know there's some stuff Mike and the rest of these guys are doing with the speakers, trying to get speakers to share a bit more about what they are doing before the show. But do you have any insights there?
I know that we're going to have some videos coming out from speakers that want to tease the talks they're going to do during CF Summit, and probably some blog posts as well. But we want all of them, right? So if you're a speaker who's had their talk accepted, get in touch. We sent you an email. Reply.
Back to that email stuff.
Yeah.
I need a trigger warning on email at this point.
It's still a thing.
I thought everyone was using Slack now.
Oh, I got plenty of Slack going on too. Don't worry about that.
The new IRC.
Well, I guess
20 years later, they changed the name. It's still the same thing. 20 years.
You can't dump GIFs as effectively
into Slack at all. So.
I do like IRC, but you can't dump GIFs as effectively.
And the emojis just aren't as fun on IRC.
Well, it's just a client thing that you can just cook up, right? So the protocol is the same thing, so I don't see much difference.
I don't disagree at all, and I think it's hilarious that you see this huge expansion in market cap of all these different companies which are essentially messaging platforms.
You know what though? What's interesting about it is that this is another example of where the tech isn't the thing, right? It's making it accessible, and Slack's being adopted outside of the tech industry, and I think that's the fascinating part, right? It's like, yeah, it's IRC, but how many times have business teams used IRC in the history of IRC?
Well, it's all about user experience. This is one of the things I've been arguing with people very strongly, inside and outside of the walls at Pivotal. Software is not about technology. Software is nearly 100%. The leverage and the benefit in software is in creating experiences, especially now. Now that you have these,
Agreed.
you have all these people walking around with their smartphones connected to high-speed computers, connected to the sum of human knowledge. You know, what are you going to do with tech? It's really about connecting the right information to the right person in a way that it makes their life better. It makes them experience something.
Yep.
With that, unless someone has some parting words, I think we'll call it an after dark and get back to work.
Yep. Cool. Cheers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Carlos.
Up next, Drive Time Radio.
I think I just had an earthquake, honestly. Cheers.
Hang on.
It'll be fine. There's little.